Mr Batchelor.
Thank you, Acting President. Well, I'm pleased to rise to speak on these bills in cognate debate. And the recent allegations of abuse in multiple childcare centres across Victoria has been extremely distressing to many of us, including those of us who are parents, but also those of us who know families with children, who know children. And I acknowledge the lasting impacts this is going to have on children, their families and the Victorian community. The government acknowledges the need for an overhaul of the child safety system here in Victoria, and the government is acting on that overhaul to ensure we have the most robust and effective systems in place to keep Victorian children safe and to rebuild community confidence in the early childhood education and care sector. And that's why the government moved quickly in July when these allegations, particularly the most recent of these allegations, were made public, to commission the Rapid Child Safety Review, led by Jo Weatherall and Pam White. And the review, in its short but effective time frame, made 22 recommendations to drive improvement in child safety. And the government accepted all of those recommendations and has committed to implementing them, and the legislation before us today is part of that implementation, an important part of the implementation of the recommendations of the Rapid Review into Child Safety here in Victoria. The reforms before us today in this legislation are comprehensive and significant and put child safety at the heart of every decision. And so the key objectives of these bills are to improve the safety of children in early childhood education and care services, because protecting children in this state is of paramount importance to the Victorian government. Now, the Rapid Review identified key actions for the government to improve child safety, and these including actions Victoria can take to accelerate the child safety reforms that are being considered nationally. This is going to strengthen safety standards in early childhood education and care so it keeps Victorian children safe. Acting President, we understand how many parents are feeling, and we understand the expectations of the broader community, because no parent should be concerned about dropping their child off in the morning at their daycare or their early learning centre. And that's why these bills are part of a suite of measures intended to safeguard our children and protect the most vulnerable in our community. We're obviously in this cognate debate debating three bills to achieve these outcomes, which implements the recommendations of the Victorian Rapid Child Safety Review, responds to recommendations from the review and makes some changes to the Social Services Regulator, and establishes the Victorian Early Childhood Regulatory Authority and the Victorian Early Childhood Worker Register. And together, these three bills provide a comprehensive, practical change to the sector and meet the expectations of the community. It's very clear that the early childhood education and care sector has expanded rapidly in recent years, driven largely by policy settings put in place by the federal government. And all governments need to stay ahead of the expansion to address future risks. And the bills before us today send a very strong signal about the importance of putting children's safety ahead of financial incentives. And it's critical that we pass these bills because they'll enable the implementation of the National Child Safety Review and other agreed national child safety reforms. For a number of reasons, it's very critical. Firstly, passing these bills ensures that we make the safety, rights and best interests of our children at the centre for all people who are involved in the early childhood education and care sector, because the safety of the children should be the most important motive driving everyone involved in this sector. The Early Childhood Education Legislation Amendment Child Safety Bill, one of the three bills included in the cognate debate here today, allows parents, carers and the community to restore confidence in that sector. And this confidence will be built upon strengthening the compliance and improving regulatory authorities. It's going to introduce new offences for inappropriate conduct and introduce new mandatory training requirements on child protection and child safety. The use of technology as a means of sharing abuse materials has become evident with predators, and we need to make sure that our laws are moving with the modern lives we live and are purpose fit for the technological environment which we live in. And to counter the nefarious means by which criminals use technology, this bill increases the regulation of that technology and the safety of the early childhood service environment. It'll also increase the information gathering and sharing powers between regulators. This will lead to improvements in educator practices, qualifications and understanding of child safety obligations. It also increases the transparency of information about compliance of providers and individuals. And the bill expands the powers of regulatory authorities and the Minister to take action to address compliance issues at the individual, provider and system level. One of the other bills as part of this Cognate debate and the suite of reforms before us today is the Social Services Regulation Amendment Child Safety Complaints and Worker Regulation Bill. And this bill consolidates key child safeguarding functions with the Working with Children check, the Reportable Conduct Scheme and the Commission for Children and Young People's current oversight of the child safe standards into the Social Services Regulator. This is going to result in a strengthened, independent authority to regulate child safety. It's going to overhaul the Working with Children check, enabling the regulator to consider unsubstantiated allegations and exclude workers from receiving a clearance on the basis of a lower threshold. And the Victorian Early Childhood Regulatory Authority Bill, the third of the three bills being considered in the Cognate debate, establishes an independent regulator for ECE services and a register of workers within the sector. And by establishing the register, the bill brings together into a single system the details of all staff working with children in the the early childhood education and care sector. This will enable the Victorian Early Childhood Regulatory Authority to quickly track and trace individuals working in the sector if required, a capacity that puts Victoria in a nation-leading position. It also makes explicit provision for the new authority to share information on the register with the Social Services Regulator for the purposes of that regulator performing its functions or exercising its powers. The reforms in these suite of bills are significant, and given their size and scale and complexity, they'll be introduced progressively to enable a smooth transition. And this will be supported by targeted communications to impacted entities and social services stakeholders. It's very important, Acting President, that we underscore that the safety of children in early childhood education and care settings is fundamental. And it's fundamental to ensuring that they can turn up to childcare or any other type of early learning or care service and immerse themselves in play and play-based learning, receiving the full, rich developmental experience most workers and services strive to provide for every child in their care. And I know that both as a parent, but also as someone who, in the course of being an elected representative, travels to and talks with many in the many services and also many educators involved in the early childhood education and care sector. And I think from the engagement that we do as elected representatives with those who work in these settings, whether they be in childcare settings, whether they be in kindergartens, we do know just how dedicated so many workers, so many educators in the early childhood education and care sector are to delivering this rich, play-based early learning environment. And we can see how significantly the children who receive that high-quality early learning and care thrive in those environments. They are at a time in their lives when they are developing at phenomenal rates, and their brain functions are developing, their social functions are developing, and the way they engage with the world changes often on a daily basis. The commitment that so many in the early childhood education and care sector provide to the children that they are charged with the responsibility of not only for caring for, but also helping to develop is remarkable. And I want to take this moment to pay tribute to all of those who work in these settings and who are doing such an incredible job for our children and for our community as a whole. Sadly, the bills before us today, the reforms before us today, the imperative that we see to do what we need to do here is being driven by the actions of a very small few. But given the importance of the task that they are entrusted to perform, given the importance of keeping our children safe, these reforms and the package of bills that are before us today are incredibly necessary, they are incredibly important, and they are part of this government's determination to make sure that all Victorian children are educated and cared for in settings that are as safe as we can possibly make them. Because if we can provide these settings that deliver on that promise, we can provide those children with the rich educational experiences that are so important to them and deliver the best start in their lives. And we can ensure to the families, the parents, the carers, the wider families of those children, the peace of mind that when their children are in the early learning, education and care settings that are regulated here in the state of Victoria, that they're receiving the best possible care in the safest possible environment. We recognise it's critical to ensure everyone who works in this sector, at whatever level it be, whether it be on the floor of the service, through to the boardrooms of the committees of management or the boards who govern those services, that fundamentally the interests of those children are what's most fundamental and of highest priority in their service. Children deserve to be safe wherever they learn, wherever they play, wherever they grow. That's what these bills are designed to achieve, and I commend these bills to the House.
Thank you, Mr Batchelor. Mrs Hermans.